Welcome to the Purposeful Project. We help entrepreneurs for free. On the Purposeful Project podcast, we share real-life stories from some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs. We like to think our podcast will provide mentorship to those that need it and give you access to the knowledge you need to start and scale a business. To hear these incredible stories, follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, or anywhere you listen to podcasts, or you can simply visit purposefulproject.com. Hey Michael, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on the show again. Thanks again for doing Pep Talk before, and it's great to have you here for our main event. And I'm really excited to hear about your life story and how you built your business. For those that haven't listened to the Pep Talk episode, maybe do you mind just taking a minute or two just to share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Well, firstly, of course, thank you for having me again. Super excited to be invited to share a little bit more, and of course, hope we can address some interesting topics. I'm from the Netherlands, born and raised in the Netherlands, and currently living in London with my wife and our doggy Margot. We just bought our first home here together, so super excited to have just moved in. I love running, kite surfing, just sports in general. I really enjoy. Very obsessed with a good barbecue. Together with David and Serge, we launched dating app Inner Circle November 2012. And Inner Circle is a high quality dating app where we where most apps focus on swiping and wasting basically your time. We focus on giving users good dates.
I never asked you in Pep Talk, but did you? How did you meet your wife?
I met my wife in a bar.
Oh, was it in your own app then? Or that's kind of where I was going with that, you know.
So this was a couple weeks before we launched Inner Circle. I was in the bar for work, which was great. So I was doing user research. I had created a little focus group and I invited them all to this bar. And I brought basically the surveys and they had to fill in the surveys. And then we talked about dating. And after that, we basically just did drinks all together in the bar. And there was a girl singing in the bar. And the girl who was singing in the bar had brought a friend. And they started talking with a friend of mine, and then basically we started chatting. And my wife, she was a graphic designer, and I was like, oh, well, at least maybe she can give me some feedback on what we've been doing for Inner Circle. And she took a look at what we did, and she thought it looked all so rubbish that she was like, no way I'm going either dating or giving feedback to this guy. But I persevered, and I think after about 4 months, she gave in, and we started dating, and the rest is history.
Even before your app was launched, in a way, your business helped you find a relationship. It was a good excuse,
definitely.
Right? That's fascinating. Yeah. Well, I've been looking at your history and some of the things you've done, and why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey to kind of get to Inner Circle? You know, how did you? Let's start off by asking you, did you think you were always an entrepreneur? Have you always felt that entrepreneurial urge?
From a young age, I was always trying to do little projects. I think one of the first projects I remember doing was stealing my neighbor's lawnmower and going around the neighborhood to ask if I could mow their lawns. And make money like that. Then a couple years later, when I was 16, a couple friends and I started kite surfing. We thought, wow, these kiteboards are really expensive to make. So we started doing research on internet, how they were manufactured. And then we started making our own kiteboards. And then we learned that there weren't that big margins in the kiteboards itself, but the apparel that comes with it, there were good margins on that. So we started making some hoodies and stuff, and basically always picking up little side projects and trying to make them big. My whole life, always been looking to do things differently. And then eventually I ended up in London studying entrepreneurship at Royal Holloway. And for my dissertation, I had to interview a couple successful entrepreneurs. And one of these entrepreneurs was David, who I had met on a dinner party through my cousin. And he was basically, he gotten out of a long-term relationship, and we were asking him like how was he doing, and he was saying like, I'm doing actually pretty well. I started to look around on online dating websites, but they're really scammy and full of fake profiles. They're very anonymous. Why is there not a dating website where there's a bit more trust, where I kind of know with who I'm going on a date with? And that is basically the trigger moment where he was saying like, I want to do this. And I said, amazing, I'm about to finish my master's, can I join? So the next day we met up in a coffee shop and we started working out the idea. And he was already working together with our CTO, Serge. And basically that's how it all started with Inner Circle.
And did you find the conversation when you were say, okay, I'm in, sounds all very casual. Did you, again, I'm thinking about my listeners, they might want to know, like, when you're starting a partnership with someone, do you have to have an agreement in place about, who owns what? And did you have that conversation early on, or was it literally like, let's just work on the idea and we'll talk all about all that stuff later? How did the kind of structure play?
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to make a clear agreement from start in top lines. I'm not sure you have to work out every detail from start. There was definitely some trust in there, as David, he was already working on some projects through his limited. So he had just published a book together with Serge, our CTO. And he said, like, let's first develop the concept and see if we can get something together before we start to get into all the difficult nitty gritty and stuff. So we basically put things on paper in top level, but only once things started to get traction is when we sat down and focused on setting it up properly.
So just looking at the timeline, so you were co-founder of a company called Cascasville. I'm probably saying that wrong. Was this so this was a previous venture, and this was after or before you were doing your MSc at Entrepreneurship at Royal Holloway? Talk us about the timeline a little bit. Like, how did it play out for you?
So while at university, it was just after the financial crisis, and I was studying at Royal Holloway, and a friend of mine, he was from Portugal, and I was visiting him in Portugal, and he showed me around. And basically, Portugal took a bit longer to get out of the crisis. And for instance, there were a lot of houses empty, lots of developments empty, and they were all for sale, but no one was going to buy a house at that time in Portugal. And I said to him, like, why are these not all being rented out as holiday homes, with Airbnb and all these fantastic platforms that were coming up. So, we saw an opportunity there together. And he, of course, had the network in Portugal. So he brought in the houses. I set up the websites and the rental setup, and we basically just started promoting that and renting them out. And this proved to be a very fun side hustle. We learned a lot, but it wasn't really scalable. So at the same time, I was already probably a bit later on is when we started working on Inner Circle. With David and Serge. So they were first parallel projects, and then eventually when Inner Circle started to take off, and I realized there was not that much scalability to the way we did our villas, that I started to fully focus on Inner Circle and stopped working on renting out the villas.
It was always interesting for my listeners who are thinking of starting businesses. Maybe they've got two businesses at the moment as well. I mean, it's very common for entrepreneurs. You kind of can't help yourself, right? You see opportunity and you try to leverage it. But it must have been a difficult decision to kind of say, right, Cascade Villas, I'm going to stop that, especially if you built it up. Or did you just know it was no point and that was an easy decision?
Yeah, it's... I think you just have to be really honest to yourself, and eventually there's only so much you can do in a day and in a week. So having constantly that open dialogue, for instance, with your business partners about where you're standing and where your focus is and priorities are drifting to. I think it's just super important to continuously communicate about where you're standing. Because it's pretty natural that if you try a couple different projects and eventually one project starts flying, that you will have to dedicate all your time to that to make it a success. And unfortunately, it's pretty hard to do multiple successful projects at the same time.
Now, you mentioned earlier meeting your co-founders while doing an entrepreneurship MSc at Royal Holloway University of London. I'm also personally a little bit skeptical about learning entrepreneurship through university, but tell me what it was like for you. Am I wrong in that view? And I might be, because I haven't done it, but what was clearly you got something out of it because you found your co-founders, but what did you think of the experience of learning entrepreneurship via university?
So to clarify, I didn't meet my co-founders at the study, but I had to interview for the course some other entrepreneurs, and basically that's how we met. So the course basically triggered me speaking with other people who were setting up ventures. But it's a question I get a lot. For example, I would say a part of the course is like small business management. And I think practically it's very handy to understand how to run a small business when you're doing a startup. And I think that is a lot more valuable than learning how to run a corporate, for example. So from a practical perspective, I thought it was a really handy course. And then from the entrepreneurship perspective, it's very inspiring to learn about entrepreneurs and to think about projects and to see how others approached it. But it doesn't take away all the difficulties that you encounter when you want to set up a business. So I don't think by studying it that you get a holy bullet that suddenly helps you get something off the ground, because that just remains always incredibly hard.
So if people are listening and they're thinking, should I go do, learn entrepreneurship at university or start a business of my own? I personally have always recommended the practical experience is always going to be generally better. But do you recommend people go and do entrepreneurship courses at universities? Would that be something you'd recommend?
I loved my year at Royal Holloway. I think it was a brilliant time in so many perspectives, and I made so many new friends, new contacts, people all over the world. And I think a very valuable thing that I got additionally from that year is all the great friendships and people I met from there. And not only on a personal level, but also on a professional level, that it has opened so many doors, so many super interesting people who have given so many interesting ideas, because for example at university there was a computer sciences department. A couple of my friends were studying computer science, and they looked at things from such a different perspective that I learned so much from them, and I'm still learning a lot from them. So I don't think university is only about the practical course itself, but also about all the other things that it brings with it.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, one of the reasons I did this podcast show is because I never want to be the person that I have my own experience, which is practically doing startups. I've never been to university and learned entrepreneurship, so I don't have the authority really to say whether or not it's a good thing to do. So it's great to have someone that's actually done it and had the experience, or who is a successful entrepreneur, giving their view. So it's very important for my listeners to kind of pick up on that, and it's important to get different views on it. Do you think entrepreneurs are born or bred?
Yeah, interesting question. I don't think the world is black and white, to be honest. So I believe people are naturally drawn to certain things. Like, for instance, if we look at the dating scene, some people are drawn to boys, some people are drawn to girls. And on my personal front, I'm, for example, naturally drawn to running. I don't know what it is, but always I found running has came to me very easily. So when I think of a run, I want to go out now and go on a run. And when you feel attracted to it, it's so much easier to practice it a lot. And when you practice it a lot, it's a lot easier to become good at it. So it feels less effort when you're naturally drawn to it. On the other hand, I think the environment is key, because on one hand, it triggers those unconscious strengths you have. For example, my parents and my friends, they were all very entrepreneurial, and we egged each other on with projects and ideas, and this is also how the kiteboard manufacturing came along. So I think your environment really helps you trigger and get the best out of you, and also it doesn't just trigger, but also how good your environment is really helps you become, say, a 6 or a 10 at something. For example, when you, I don't know, want to learn to play squash and you play with people who are less good than you, then it takes a lot more time to become really good at it. Whereas if you are going to play squash with people who are incredibly good, then you're just going to learn so much quicker. And of course, when you become good at something, it becomes more fun. So it's like a vicious cycle.
It's very interesting. I think the environment is so important. I couldn't agree more. Looking back at your history, I mean, you have had a few jobs, and I know they were early on in your career. But what do you think about working for someone else? I mean, you were doing a management trainee course with a company based in Singapore. It sounds like that was interesting. Did you ever feel like, hey, I could get a job, maybe this entrepreneurial gig isn't for me, it's too hard, and I'll just have a job? Did it ever cross your mind?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was younger, I was always thinking of setting up my own companies. But of course, once you're in the struggle of, once I was in the struggle of building my own company with Inner Circle, so many times, you hit walls, you get into difficult situations, and you see your friends getting nice salaries and being on a very steady track, and it's like maybe the grass always seems greener on the other side. But I've thought it 1,000 times. Why don't I just get a job? But in the end, the reward, the satisfaction you get of the impact you make is just such an incredible thrill that I wouldn't change it.
No, I also...
I did...
Please go ahead.
I did when we launched Inner Circle and we didn't manage to make it get off the ground. I started applying for jobs at Google and at IBM and stuff. They all rejected me, and then suddenly the Inner Circle started to get traction and things started to explode, and luckily I didn't have to continue applying for jobs.
Yeah, sometimes that rejection can be good, right? I mean, anyone listening right now that's not got the job they wanted or needed, maybe that's a sign, right? It could be a sign sometimes that you're not meant to get that job. It can be a good thing.
Yeah, very true.
Do you think, you mentioned there it took off. I was reading, your business went viral. And how did that happen? How did you manage to get the business to take off? What was the trigger, do you think?
It was a combination of quite a few elements. We basically launched it in November 2012 in Amsterdam by inviting a lot of our single friends to a bar. And we said, in order to get in and get free drinks, you have to download the app and sign up. And our friends were quite hesitant because, back then online dating was quite frowned upon. Like, I don't need a dating app. But at the same time, people were curious. It was around the same time that Tinder had just launched in the US. People were starting to get open to these kind of things. And I think so the timing, the curiosity, and then we created a format of exclusivity where you could only get onto the app if you were invited by someone on the app. And that exclusivity is what really triggered the virality. And it took a while. For a while, it was basically simmering under the surface. And then once enough people started inviting each other and talking about online dating, which was like, really? Online dating? It suddenly exploded, and the domino stones started to fall quicker and quicker.
I think it's interesting to have been a fly on the wall when you were having the conversation about that exclusivity thing, because it's kind of counterintuitive to a business that wants to scale, isn't it? You don't just invite anybody on. You literally create the old nightclub system where everyone queues outside, right? That kind of like, how do I get in? Did you have a conversation?
Yeah.
Did that come naturally to you, that idea, or is it definitely something that had to? It's not easy, is it, to say no to people? Basically, it must have been quite hard to enact that strategy and not just want huge growth quickly.
Yeah, we as we didn't raise any money, we didn't have very deep pockets, so we had to come up with a strategy which we believed could potentially give us fast growth without much money, and so we knew we had to do something that had potential virality through, for example, exclusivity. So we just listed the different ideas we could come up with, and this seemed to be the lowest cost, highest reward option for us.
Yeah, I just think for people listening that are thinking of starting a business, the concept that, you're going to limit the access. I think most people would think, oh no, we want as many people to hear about it as possible. And I'm just trying to imagine, as a dating app model back in 2012, it wasn't common, dating apps yet, but the idea of inviting someone onto a dating app, my initial feeling is it sounds a bit weird, right? Like, if you are on a dating app yourself, who are you going to invite? Your mates? What was the trigger there in the early days? Was it? I love the bar concept, by the way. I think that's an interesting one. You get free drinks if you download the app, but you can only afford to do that so many times, right?
Yeah, we could only afford to do that once. It's of course there has to be a reward, an incentive. So it's not just you're on the app, so you want to invite your friends. In the inner circle, we created an incentive that you would get all your messages and activity for free if you would get 2 friends to sign up. So it was kind of it was exclusivity, but the opposite of exclusivity, because there was an incentive with it to invite your friends and get that snowball rolling, basically.
Interesting enough. Did you? I mean, I guess might not remember this, but did you find that people only then invited 2 people? Was it exactly what you asked them to do, or did people end up inviting a lot more than 2?
I'd say the majority of the people is pretty functional about it. So they invited just the people to get the free access. But then there's always some outliers who basically invite hundreds of people and are really passionate about spreading the word. And those are, of course, fantastic ambassadors to have for your brand.
Now, I was reading you have over 2.5 million members now. Is that out of date or still correct?
3.5 million.
I'm always a million off, no matter what. But 3.5 million members. That's an incredible community. It must. You must look back, and from the early days, I'm sure, till now. I just can't imagine 3.5 million people interacting on a platform. Do you realise how far you've come? Do you sometimes think about that? That's half the population of London, for example, almost.
It's the interesting thing, I think, of entrepreneurship is when you start, you have very practical goals, like we want this amount of members or this amount of revenue. But every time you get a little step closer, the goalposts move and they move and they move, and you basically never create those moments of celebration to celebrate a milestone and to really take it in. And what we in recent years started to do is to think, what is it that we're really doing? So for us, for instance, our big, hairy, audacious goal is that every second a member gets together in real life. And currently that is every 7 seconds, which is, of course, pretty crazy to think about. Like every 7 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and someone is on a date. That's a really crazy thought. So I think the moment that when we reach that every second a member gets together, that will really feel like a special milestone. But before that, I think the milestones didn't really have enough substance. They just kept moving and weren't inspirational enough to really feel as a big achievement.
Coffee shops around the world owe you a big thank you, I think, probably. I've sat in coffee shops and heard these dates for the first time, but that's an incredible statistic. I mean, frankly, to have someone meeting every 7 seconds because of your platform on a date is pretty amazing, isn't it? Do when you think about expansion, is it all done? Again, this might be out of date, but it's 50 cities globally. It's the last time I read you were in 50 cities. Embarrass my research team now by telling me it's 20 more than that or something, but that's also pretty amazing, isn't it? I mean, you started off in the Netherlands, I know, but to be in 50 cities is incredible.
Yeah, that is a really bizarre thought. I mean, in most of the cities, none of our team have been and have visited, and at the same time, our support team speaks every day to hundreds of people in all those cities. Some, of course, come with questions. Some are raving because they met their husband or wife, or they just got a baby. And it's incredibly cool to see that the most random places around the world, we've brought people together. And what's also quite cool, for example, is that our team, especially during Corona, we've been growing pretty fast. And we've got, for instance, colleagues in Brazil who we've never met. And it's fantastic. It's incredibly cool to see how you can, just expand online as a company, and all still work together on the same purpose.
Now, I know the industry's moved on a lot since you launched your business in 2012. I was just wondering how you stay innovative, really, how you continue to make a difference. Is there any strategy you have for staying innovative?
Focus. Focus is, I think, the most important thing, to really understand what set us apart, and keep doing that better than the competition, of course. And the competition, they focus on what sets them apart. And as long as we keep claiming our domain and keep doing that better, we remain ahead of of all the other thousands and thousands of dating apps that are being launched every year. And also the timing, of course, having started in 2012 has given us a huge amount of knowledge and technological advantage over all the competition that is being launched every day.
I think the what sets you apart thing that you're mentioning here is so crucial. I really want my audience to pick up on this. Defining what sets you apart is really tricky, though, isn't it? So, in your business, what do you think? What sets you apart, and how do you keep innovating in that?
The funny thing is that we didn't realize for the first couple of years what set us really truly apart. We had a hunch, so we executed what we did at a hunch, and that went well. And we basically just kept improving on it. But then eventually we started to hit a glass ceiling as a brand and as a company. Where our growth was slowing down, and this was the moment that we were like, why is this happening? And we went back to the drawing board, and we started sparring about what is the essence of what we've always been doing really well. And that is the moment that we discovered that what we really do well is help people meet in real life, get people together in real life, and that is the essence of what we do well. Whereas other dating apps say they focus on the swiping, or who makes the first move, or on the relationship, or whatever. The essence of dating is the date, is meeting up. And we realized that is what we've been doing well in the app, through features in the app, but also, for instance, by organizing real life events over the world, across the world, everywhere. It's all about bringing people together in real life. And that was the thing that we always did really well. And that is understanding that has been a crucial driver in the growth that came in the years after that.
Your competition are making notes, so I'm only nervous now. It's a really interesting point. I've not heard of that before, and so but how did you figure that out? Was it? I mean, that's quite a hard thing to realize, isn't it? Like that element, like you said, first couple of years you didn't even realize it. What did you just brainstorm? You sat around a table and said, "What is it?" And then you just realized. Or how did you get to that?
We worked with an external agency who was really good at asking questions, lots of questions to our users, to ourselves, looking at the space, and they basically helped us unravel the essence of what we'd been doing.
Wow, that's a very special service, because I think a lot of people I know in our community struggle with this. They hit a glass ceiling, and they can't figure out how to take it to the next level, and they're not quite sure what made them popular in the first place. It's a really, really interesting thing. Yeah. And I guess one thing I guess probably common is ask your users, go and talk to your consumers and have their view, but you got to ask the right questions, right?
That is one of the things I personally enjoy most. So I've been to, every event since 2012 except 2 events in London. I've been to lots of our events in Paris, in Amsterdam, and always the events I used to speak to as many people as I could to learn from them how they were experiencing the app and what really drive them at a deeper level. And this, I guess, always gave an unconscious hunch of what was important, but only by realizing what really was the essence of that drove our business, made it a lot easier to focus on what matters for the user most.
Now, I know David and Serge will probably be listening to this podcast at some point, but I was really interested to understand the dynamics of 3 people as co-founders. How has that played out? How have you managed to make that work? Because I find, I've got one partner in life and I find it quite hard. So I can't imagine having 2 and a big company to run. But how have you managed to make that work? What do you think is the secret recipe?
It is super hard. And I must say we're probably, none of us are naturally the best communicators. So I think in the first years, because we were just with the 3 of us, it's very easy because everybody has their own domain and you're all running in the same direction and it's very easy to be aligned. But then when you become bigger, there's this transition in the company from, say, an execution-focused company or known as a family to a tribe where there's a lot of people with lots of opinions, and then it suddenly becomes a lot harder and this communication becomes so much more important. And if you would ask me, like, what would I do differently or earlier on, is involve a coach who doesn't only coach the founders individually, but also as a team to help them be a really good glue and communication and be really well aligned in every single way.
Yeah, I've not heard that before. It's a really good point, isn't it? Football teams have coaches that keep the team together. You've got lots of individual football stars there that all think they're great, right? But getting them all aligned, it's almost like, I guess, like having a chairman or like having like a board of advisors almost, but where there was a coaching piece there is pretty probably vital to keep you all on the same page. But the other thing, I guess, is also the structure of the company. Again, if you don't mind me asking, was it all equal? How did you decide who gets what?
Well, I always think it's good in a company when there's one captain, one boss. So it was David's initial idea. He put down some initial investment, for instance, into the night of the pub, into the development fees, things like that. So he has the majority share, and I'd say Serge and I, our shares are more in balance with sweat equity. So we made an agreement from start that if we would work on the project for a certain period, we would get certain amount of shares in the company.
Again, this is something that's not talked about much, and I think it really is. People need to see how this can work, because I know a lot of people who turn down starting up businesses because they feel they didn't get 50-50, and it really isn't about having 50-50 necessarily. It is about having, a stake in a business that you enjoy, that you're proud of, that's successful. And then the number doesn't really matter if it's successful, right? Better to have, I guess, 5% of Facebook than 51% of MySpace. Not that you'd want Facebook, but conceptually, right? It's better to have a business that's doing well. And it's been now, I guess, how long have you been operating? 11 years? 10 years?
Yeah.
You've been 10 years operating, right?
Yeah.
So you've been working together
coming up for 10 years.
Yeah, it's another milestone you mustn't forget. I feel like I've just reminded you.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big milestone. 10 years in business is not easy, right? So, and I feel like you're just as enthusiastic as ever. But if you went back and started again, what would you do differently, do you think?
Well, probably I would definitely, what I just mentioned, the coaching. I think that would have made our communication and our way of working so much easier to be aligned. But also, for instance, something, values are something quite intangible. So we set values, and then the values, they're there, but they don't really do anything. And only in recent years, when we made that transition from family to tribe, is when we started to think about our values. And what the beautiful thing of values are, if you really define them, but not just define them, make them part of the DNA and activate them, is that basically the team can make thousands of decisions, and the right decisions, totally by themselves. They don't need say the management or people to align with, because the values really give them the answer they need in order to do their jobs right. And therefore, I think setting up values and bringing them to life and making them part of the DNA from start is a super important thing. Another point would come back to what we discussed earlier, is understanding what we are doing, because we understood only after multiple years and then hitting the glass ceiling what was the real strength of our business. Whereas if we would have known that earlier, we could have been a lot earlier in charge of the narrative of our brand, because what we noticed is that at some point, because we weren't telling a consistent brand story, is that the media and our users started telling their own story. So when you would ask 10 different users at the time what the inner circle was, you would get 10 different answers, and the same from the media. So making sure that we really understood the essence of what we do and communicate clearly about that would have been it's a huge driver as well in growing faster. On a personal level, I think the milestone of being able to get a okay salary out of the company we built was huge. I think it took about 4 or 5 years to be on an okay salary, and that was a fantastic feeling on a personal level. But on the business level, the default of that every 7 seconds a member gets together is just incredible, and I can't wait to reach the every second. And every time when I walk into the office, there's this huge wall with baby cards and wedding cards and stuff, and these are all for me the most important points of success.
I really like both points that you're making there, and I think it's fair, as again thinking about my listeners that are trying to build out, what success looks for them, but having a personal success. I really love I really feel the energy around the point you're making on salary, because it's so hard to build a business, do something you love, and be able to sustain yourself. And, I used to always, again, that's zero. I used to say to people, if I can get a business to zero, so in other words, it's covering its costs, and I'm able to do what I love, then that's it. I've made it, and as an entrepreneurial journey, sometimes that is a brilliant marker for success. Just being able to pay yourself enough to live a decent life and have your own business. It's so I like it. I feel your energy around it, Michael, and it's nice. It's a really important thing for my listeners to hear as well, that sometimes that's a good enough goal, and and I know you mentioned you got yourself a new home. I'm sure you waited a very long time and made a lot of sacrifices to get to that point where you can get your own home. That's also a big personal landmark, right?
Yeah, huge landmark, and of course, not to forget my wife's role in that, as she's an entrepreneur as well. She sold her business a couple months ago, so that of course, we really did that together.
You should be listening, so we better give her all the credit. To be honest, it's but I know what you mean. But I think our partners in life actually is a really interesting one. For, again, my listeners, I always tell people personally that I would not be a success today, and my definition of success is freedom. I wouldn't have the freedom I have today if it wasn't for my partner. That actually she supported me when I had nothing and believed in me, and when I was feeling low, encouraged me. And so, you talked about it earlier, your environment, but your partner is so crucial, that life partner or people around you, of course, as well, but having the right people around you. So you were actually dating another entrepreneur, which I guess can also come with its highs and lows, right? Because you're both building something. So it's not like you've got one's got a job and a stable income and the other is taking this risky gamble on a new, business like Inner Circle. You're both entrepreneurs, right? So that dynamic equally probably made you understand each other too, right?
Yes, the dynamic made us understand each other, but it took for me a while to understand that as a partner, it's sometimes more valuable to just listen and to try to help. Because you just need you of course have your business partners and people you're already sparring with and get advice from, and I noticed that for her, she had her business partner, of course, who she was always sparring with, and sometimes it's just more important to be able to share and talk about the things happening, and in that way digest them, instead of having someone who listens very functionally and then gives direct advice. And I think that's been one of the biggest learnings for me in our relationship is listening and being there instead of trying to be her co-founder.
I think I've seen your next career, Michael, a combination of coaching and matching where you help people in their personal lives in this way. I couldn't agree more. And as another entrepreneur, I'm married to an entrepreneur as well. So, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners, because they want to be an entrepreneur, have entrepreneurial people in their lives. And it is quite difficult when my partner says to me a problem in the business. I find myself diving in. Okay, so this is what we're going to do to fix it. And okay, so, this is what, and actually you're right. Very, very good self-awareness, Michael, to kind of like, you know what, just listen, be there, and don't try and solve it. But did she do the same for you? It sounds like she did with your graphic design in the early days, right? She's like, oh, this is all awful. I bet she fixed it all.
Yeah, so she set up an agency, a branding agency, and we worked together lots. Basically, on one hand, it was always fantastic to work with her because she's really, really, really good. So the things they delivered was always phenomenal, but it caused so much tension doing the projects that every time during the project I would say never again, never again. And then in the end, we needed to have something great again. So we would ask her again for help. But that's been a very interesting dynamic as well.
Well, I'm also married to a graphic designer, and we started a graphic design company together called Fluid, which we sold to PwC. So I know about the tension you're talking about, but that tension can also be healthy, I guess, right? There's a level of respect there, but and you appreciate what they can do. I mean, I love working with my partner. I recommend it to people. I really think it can teach you a lot about each other and make the relationship stronger. Like moving in together, right? It either makes you or breaks you. So
the results were always beyond exceptional. I think the best results were from projects working together with her. But it did cost a lot of arguments.
Yeah, but if you've met a couple that's never argued, I'll show you a couple that will soon be divorced. You got it. Those arguments can make you stronger if you can get through it, right? But I see an extension to Inner Circle long term as well. Like I want to call it relationship counselling. You must have had those conversations at points. There must be, there's no relationship is perfect. I don't care how great the matchup was. There's always going to be difficulties. You ever think about extensions like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, maybe also a wedding company to help people getting married, and kindergarten. And nursery.
Yeah.
Inner Circle schools.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Maybe some of the people would like to then come and work for us. So we create a full life cycle with Inner Circle.
Wow. Yeah. You could, help people find puppies before they have kids. It's
exactly.
There's loads. I mean, the word focus jumps in, doesn't it? You must have had these internal conversations many times, and you're like, hold on a minute. This is not what we do, right? But but anyway, it's definitely interesting, and I definitely think from an entrepreneurial learning perspective that co-founder element we just talked about with David and Serge, and you're learning there around coaching, and then the personal dynamics in a personal relationship. I really think it's important for people to get their partner on board with what they're doing. and make their partner be a part of what they're doing, even as you say, if it's just in a listening, supporting capacity. But I see way too many businesses fail because the partner or the founder is not into it. So it's a really important point there.
Yeah, Gemma has definitely been our biggest ambassador and supporter.
Again, if she's listening, it's probably her. It's all her that the business has worked. We should give her full credit, right? I have to say, without the right branding, I do think businesses struggle, especially businesses that are trying to create a certain image of trust, which is something you've built up as a business. People have to trust you, right, with quite personal information, and branding really plays an important part in that trust building exercise. So all credit to branding folks out there and your wife. If you were to go back to your younger self, Michael, and give some advice maybe to yourself, what would it be?
I think my primary advice would be you can do anything as long as you put in the grind. And just nothing comes by itself. No success comes easily. So you need to put in the grind. There needs to be a plan and you need to stick to it. There's just no success in the world without hard and clever work. So whatever I go for, I should realize the perseverance it takes to make it a success. And when I look back at all the projects that I tried in the past, there was definitely a lack of focus and perseverance. Especially the younger I was, the less focus and perseverance.
Were your parents entrepreneurs, out of interest?
Sorry?
Were your parents entrepreneurs?
Yeah. My dad had set up his own company, and my mom, she set up always her own projects. Like she produced things and then went on to sell those.
So when you said you're doing this entrepreneurial project, well, you've done a few, of course, they were always like, "Yep, good idea." When
I said to my parents I'm going to set up a dating app, they looked very weird. They didn't really know what they heard. I think maybe they were even a little bit embarrassed, online dating, really. But I guess then, over the years, of course, when, for example, some close friends of my mom, their children met their partners through the inner circle. So now my mom is as proud as she can be. So it definitely, they did look a bit odd at the idea at start, but they've always been supportive. And I remember my dad saying, when you've got an idea, you've got to go for it and see how it goes. Yeah, again, I think a lot of my listeners... Otherwise it will... No, sorry. Otherwise, it will always come, be in the back of your mind, and you just want to give it a go. Either get rid of it in your system, or it may turn out a success. Yeah, very wise advice. You don't want to live with regrets, do you? So it's important to, I guess, take that idea and go for it. But I guess I know a lot of my listeners have their peer group, particularly parents, that might tell them not to do an idea or get a real job. It's something I hear quite a lot. So having the support of your families is of course also very important. But it's nice to hear your mum's proud when she meets people that have met through your app. That must be awesome too. When you meet people randomly. Yeah. Like, oh, my son's behind that business. I can just picture her gleaming with pride for what you've achieved. But well, look, I want to thank you so much, Michael, for yet again coming on the podcast and sharing your story with us this time, as well as your knowledge. And it really is an inspiration what you built. And I know in the pep talk we talked about how you built it without raising money, and how you built it just through, I guess, just being a good product for people and something that clients want, and that patience, which is something you mentioned in the pep talk, really resonated with me in the previous podcast, and yet again just hearing how you built this business and how you've worked with your partners both in life and in business to make it work is inspiring, Michael. So thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and looking forward to see the future Purposeful Project podcasts. Thank you so much. Yeah, I am. Unfortunately, I'm still in a relationship. Otherwise, I'd be going and downloading your platform right now. But I might get into trouble even if I say it's research. But anyone listening that is single and wants a proper, as we say in England, a proper app, then go download Inner Circle. The links are below, and let us know what you think. Michael, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you for listening to the Purposeful Project podcast today. If you got any value from this podcast, then do feel free to give us a review and give us your feedback. And if you think anybody out there might enjoy this story of this real life successful entrepreneur, then feel free to share. And of course, go and visit purposefulproject.com and join our mailing list at any point. Thanks again for listening.